Good morning. Today's video is going to be me sharing a couple of stories that are part of my Kundalini experience. As I have mentioned before, I am a photographer. I'm a professional photographer. I have a professional website, and I've had a few gallery shows. But the reason for my photography has developed over time. When I was young, I remember my parents had a little 110 camera back in like the early 70s or something, and I would always take it and try to get pictures. And my grandfather, I would sit on his lap. There was a picture of me when I was like 3 or 4 years old, and I was sitting on my grandpa's lap, and he was showing me a picture of a photography book. So you could say that I have always been interested and encouraged to take pictures. So I first dabbled with my parents' 110, then 35 millimeter came out. I received my very first camera when I was 16. It was completely automatic. I mean, completely manual. You had to set the ISO settings and absolutely everything. And I still have that camera, by the way. And then later, much later, well, I had a few of like your Olympus or Canon point and shoot kind of cameras. And then I invested in a professional camera years later. The reason behind my photography is, one, I love nature. I love the outdoors, beautiful sunsets, landscapes. When I moved to Colorado, I just fell in love with the wildlife, the elk and the eagles and the bighorns, and just, you know, the fox, the little fox, all of the different animals of this area are just truly phenomenal. And more that I learned about them when I did gallery shows. I did like information cards with each image that I presented, and I learned about the wildlife, and I wanted to share that with everyone, and I wanted to protect the animals and their habitat. So that was the driving force behind my turning professional. And it's so much fun to be out there. You hike up a big Sage Hill Mesa, and at the top, there's pronghorn laying in the distance, and then they jump up when they see you, and they're like, do we run or do we stay? You know, that fight or flight kind of thing. They usually would run away, but on some very special occasions along the Kundalini journey, God has created absolutely miraculous moments, and so I'm going to share two of those moments. They both happened in the same place, but on two different trips, actually 2 different years. That I went to the top of a 14er, which in Colorado is a mountain peak that is over 14,000 feet high in elevation. And so, as I told you in other videos, I can read images in the clouds, and I was shown a picture of me, and standing behind me was Jesus, and he kind of had his arms out, kind of around me, not holding me, but like holding the space. And in front of me was a little animal. In the clouds, it's sometimes hard to distinguish between some of the baby animals, but it was an animal. And so I knew that something magical was going to be happening, but I didn't know where or when. And so that was kind of in the back of my mind, but you get on with day-to-day living and you kind of put it aside. So anyway, my photo friend and I we planned a trip to go back up to this 14er, which is about a 5-hour drive from where I live. And we have to get in hotel rooms because it's so far. We want to be able to spend the day, maximize at least a day and a half up on the mountain trying to capture wildlife and just experience the awe and wonder and beauty from a mountain peak. It's truly breathtaking. So we drove up there, and we were at about 12,000 feet at Summit Lake, and there were some bighorn sheep. This was very early in, I'm not sure if it was the end of May or like the first day or two of June. It was right like the day or two after they had opened the mountain, because they close it in the winter because it gets so much snow. But anyway, we went up there, and off to the side in one of the meadows were a pretty decent sized herd of bighorn sheep, ewes and their babies, females and babies. And so a lot of people had just kind of parked right along the road, and then there is actually a parking lot and toilet facilities up there also. So we just stopped right in the road and jumped out and started, trying to get in a position to take some pictures. And I saw this little tiny bighorn sheep lamb, and it was like 12 inches tall, and it started running around, and it started baaing. It was going baa, 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 and it was running all over the place, and I was like, oh gosh, look at it. And so I started taking some pictures, and then I realized that it still had its little umbi connected. It still had a little umbilical cord hanging down. It was so young. I mean, it was only a couple of days old. Usually the mother keeps them in the rocks, kind of hides them in rock overhangs and things like that. But suddenly, in that very moment, I had a flashback of the vision that I had seen in the clouds from Jesus, of that moment where he's holding it and there's this little bighorn sheep lamb, and it would, stop and graze for a minute. It doesn't really eat too much at that point. It's suckling, but it would kind of nibble or sniff around on the grass. And then there was another bighorn lamb. It was probably about a week or two older. It was slightly larger. and they were kind of running around together. I have no idea their gender, but it was so adorable. It was probably about an hour and a half of them in the meadow, and then they moved over to lick the minerals in the dirt parking lot. And so I was taking pictures. My friend took some pictures of me in that time also, and there's a couple of them on my photography website, and you can see the little umbilical cord hanging down from this bighorn sheep lamb, and it was just so special. It was truly a God moment where he held the animals, and I was able to not only get some pictures but experience just a beautiful, beautiful miracle of life in the wildlife. So that was one of my absolute favorite stories. And another one up on that same 14er peak had to do with mountain goats. Now, mountain goats live at very high elevation. They were introduced to Colorado in like the 1940s or 50s. They are not native Colorado animals. But they have been thriving in the high peaks around Colorado. So Pikes Peak, you might see a few of them. And there's some other ones outside of Denver. But anyway, so on this day, it was actually later in the season, a couple of years prior. It was one of the first times I had gone up to this 14er. And anyway, I saw the nannies, the females are called nannies, and the baby mountain goats are called kids, so the nanny and kids. There was a group of nanny and kids laying up on the tundra grasses, and this was probably more like later in June, maybe even July. And excuse me. And so I had a feeling that everything was good. I get telepathic information. And so I went and I sat on this big boulder. And it was probably about, oh gosh, I don't know, maybe 30 to 50 feet away from the herd that was laying in the meadow. And they were just sunning themselves. And so I sat there and I was taking different pictures. And my photo friend had gone a distance away from me and was taking some pictures. And then I kind of lost track of him. And some other people you could see were stopping up on the road. It's not a very good road. I sure hope they improve it. But anyway, some other people were there, but I wasn't paying attention to any of them. I was just focused in on this nanny and kid group. And then one of the mothers got up and she started to graze, and she had twins. And so there were twin lambs were following her. And anyway, they were, like I said, 30 to 50 feet away, and they started to very slowly kind of move in my direction. And so I kept taking some pictures, and then I'd put my camera down and kind of look and see if there was something else I needed to photograph. And it, you know, it was just really probably 10 minutes or so, and then she started to move closer towards me, and her two little lambs are following her. And this one, he kind of like focused in on me, you know, he kind of peeked around his mom, and he's looking at me, and so I take pictures, and then it was just like this systematic, she started to move closer and closer and closer, and she was probably within about 10 feet of me, and this little lamb came running over to me and stopped right at my feet. And he was so close I had to put my camera down. I couldn't see him. And I was like, oh, well, hi there, little one, how are you? And he just kind of looked at me, you know, turned his head side to side like, what are you? I mean, he was probably only about 6 to 8 weeks old, tops. And then he just kind of looked at me, and then his mother moved a little bit closer, and he just kind of trotted over to his mother, and she walked right by me, just right past me on that rock. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was so beautiful. And I turned to find my photo friend, and there were like 30 or so people behind me, and they were just like, wow, and they witnessed all of that happening, and it was just an absolutely special moment that was provided by God. And I have a picture on my website called Nanny and Kid, and it says mountain goats up on this 14er. So I also have a Facebook site. It's really just for my photography. I don't allow friends or anything like that. But my photography is to protect the animals and their habitat. And here in Gunnison, we have Blue Mesa Reservoir, which is one of the, well, it is the biggest reservoir in the entire state. And it is just teeming with wildlife all around it. And I would really, really love to see this place protected and turned into Blue Mesa National Park. We have these amazing sage hills that are full of about 400 different species of wildlife, and they do some wildlife conservation and protection here, but they still allow hunting. And like in the West Elk Wilderness, and I really wish they would end hunting and preserve these animals so that you're not going to just see them in the zoo one day, that you will actually be able to come here like Rocky Mountain National Park and truly enjoy not only the abundant outdoor activities that we have, but the beautiful, beautiful wildlife, and see just a true, beautiful creation of God. So those are my two stories during my photography. Whatever God gifts you in your life along the soul journey, He will multiply it. And so that's one of the special gifts, is the miracle of God and His free gifts to you. There's no strings, there's no attachments, there's no conditions. It's just, you are loved. This is what you like to do, and look, here is a beautiful moment in the wild that I made just for you. So whatever you love, if you love tinkering with cars and you do the soul journey, then I don't know if God's going to make more cars break down, but He will bring you more cars to tinker with. He'll bring you the things that you love, and what you focus on multiplies and increases. And it's not usually to harm other people, but it is just one of the magical miracles of awakening Kundalini. So I wanted to share that today, a very personal wildlife experience. But I wanted you to know just how wonderful Jesus is, and He will make things wonderful in your life too. Thank you so much.